What occurs when polished charm meets unwavering journalistic poise? How does a guest expecting diversity and control react when faced with a host who stands firm? This was not an ordinary morning talk show segment. The Tamron Hall show witnessed a televised showdown between ego and integrity, leaving viewers astonished. The Tamron Hall show's stage exuded its usual warmth. Studio 6A buzzed with anticipation as the camera captured eager faces. At the center sat Tamron Hall, composed and graceful, each movement deliberate. Initially, it seemed to be a routine interview about Meghan's latest philanthropic effort, but the atmosphere felt heavier than the topic implied. "Meghan, thank you for joining us," Tamron began with her trademark professionalism, warm yet steady. "You've been in the headlines quite a bit lately. Before we delve into your new project, I'd like to ask, how are you and Harry doing? The public is always curious." It was the gentlest of openings, but Meghan's eyes flickered with something sharp before her lips formed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We're wonderful, Tamron. Better than ever. Honestly, I find it a little tiresome that people think they have the right to constantly speculate about our marriage. Maybe people should focus on their own relationships instead of obsessing over mine." The audience shifted uncomfortably, with a few chuckles rippling through, but Tamron's expression remained neutral and unfazed. "Fair enough," she replied smoothly, "but the speculation partly stems from how public you and Harry have been about your personal lives. Do you think that openness invites curiosity?" Meghan leaned back in her chair, her posture exuding practiced confidence. "I don't see it as openness. I see it as correcting narratives that others have twisted. When you're constantly under attack, sometimes you have to speak up. We're just protecting ourselves. That's hardly an invitation for gossip." The audience clapped politely, though the edge in Meghan's tone was evident. Tamron maintained her even tone. And yet, the rumors persist. Some say Harry struggles with stepping away from royal duty. Others whisper about tension between him and his family. How do you navigate those challenges? Meghan's smile hardened into something closer to a smirk. "You know, Tamron, I think it's ridiculous that people continue to push this idea of tension. Harry and I are perfectly fine. Honestly, it sounds like projection. Maybe it's the media who can't let go, not Harry." There was a bite in her words now, and a few people in the audience exchanged glances. Tamron, ever composed, simply nodded, flipping through her notes with unhurried grace. "Let's turn for a moment to your relationship with the royal family," Tamron continued, her voice steady. "Looking back, do you think there was any way things could have gone differently? Many have suggested that cultural differences, expectations, and traditions might have played a part." Meghan's eyes narrowed slightly. "What people don't understand is that I entered that family with the best of intentions. But when an institution refuses to adapt or modernize, there's little anyone can do. Frankly, I don't think the problem was me. I think the problem was them. And if people can't see that, well, that's their ignorance, not mine." The room grew still. The sharpness of her tone contrasted heavily with Tamron's steady demeanor. "Some would say that's quite a strong statement," Tamron offered gently. "It's the truth," Meghan snapped, though she tried to soften it with another polished smile. "I don't sugarcoat things. Maybe that's why some people have a problem with me. I refuse to play along with outdated traditions that don't serve anyone anymore." A ripple of murmurs passed through the studio audience. Meghan's words hung in the air, weighted with arrogance. But Tamron, still poised, didn't rise to the bait. Instead, she shifted the focus. "You had a successful acting career before your marriage. Do you ever miss that part of your life?" Meghan tilted her head, her expression laced with disdain. "Honestly, acting feels trivial compared to the work I do now. I've outgrown that. The idea of me going back to Hollywood gossip and scripts, written by people who don't understand the world. Well, let's just say I've moved on to bigger things, important things." The crowd gave a polite round of applause, though it sounded more hesitant than enthusiastic. Tamron's calm remained unbroken, But her eyes told a different story. She had taken note. "So," she said softly, "you don't believe your acting career shaped the platform you have today?" "Of course not," Meghan scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "My platform is built on who I am and what I stand for, not on some TV role I left behind years ago." And there it was, the first real crack in the polished veneer. The arrogance, the dismissal, the refusal to acknowledge her past. Tamron, sensing it, leaned ever so slightly forward, her tone still velvet, but with steel underneath. "Well," she said, "our viewers may have their own thoughts on that." The audience erupted in scattered applause, though Meghan's eyes darted briefly, searching for approval that seemed less certain now. The tension in the studio was rising, subtle but undeniable. What had begun as a cordial exchange was evolving into something sharper, something raw, and everyone watching could feel it. The hum of the studio lights seemed louder now, though in truth it was the silence between Tamron and Meghan that filled the air. The audience shifted in their seats, sensing that the smooth surface of a morning interview had begun to crack, and what lay beneath was unpredictable. Tamron smiled politely, her hands folded neatly over her notes. "Meghan, let's speak for a moment about the late Queen. You've shared your experiences with the royal family broadly, but many people admired your relationship with Her Majesty. What was that dynamic truly like?" For a flicker of a second, Meghan's expression softened, then hardened again. She crossed her legs, leaned back, and answered with an edge. "I respected the Queen, of course, but respect only goes so far when the entire institution is stacked against you. People like to romanticize our relationship as if it was something special, but in reality, I was treated like an outsider always. And frankly, I think the Queen could have done more to stop it." Gasps rippled through the studio. The weight of criticizing the Queen, still a figure of deep respect, even after her passing, was not lost on the American audience. Tamron didn't flinch. Her voice remained smooth, her tone measured. "Some might say that's a harsh assessment, especially given the public appearances where the two of you seemed close. Do you feel you're perhaps rewriting that relationship through the lens of everything that followed?" Meghan's head snapped toward her, her voice dripping with superiority. "No, Tamron. I think I know my own life better than anyone else. It's amusing when journalists who weren't there try to psychoanalyze my relationships. With all due respect, you don't know what I lived through." "I do." A sharp exhale echoed from the audience. Meghan's dismissiveness landed like a slap, but Tamron remained unshaken, her calm composure now resembling a fortress. "I don't doubt that you lived it, but you've also spoken publicly repeatedly about those relationships. And when public figures share their stories, it's natural for the press to ask questions, especially when versions of those stories shift." Meghan scoffed lightly, shaking her head. "Here we go with that tired line again. Versions shifting. Maybe, just maybe, things evolve when you reflect on them. Or would you prefer I stick to the same script just to keep people like you comfortable?" The audience murmured again, tension simmering. Meghan was no longer the polished duchess with carefully measured words. She was barbed, defensive, almost daring Tamron to push further. Tamron did. "Let's talk about the move to America," she said, her voice carrying that subtle weight that told viewers she was steering into deeper waters. Many saw it as a fresh start. Others saw it as abandoning duty. How do you respond to those critics? Meghan sat straighter, her tone clipped. "Critics will always exist. Frankly, I don't care what they think. We left a toxic environment. We chose freedom. And if people can't understand that, then maybe they're trapped in the same outdated systems we escaped. I won't apologize for choosing my happiness over a crumbling monarchy." There it was again, the disdain, the condescension. Tamron's eyes, steady as steel, narrowed just a touch. "Do you think, perhaps, some of that disdain for the monarchy comes from personal conflicts rather than systemic issues?" Meghan's lips curled into a smirk. "Are you suggesting I left because of personal grudges?" "Please, I think anyone with half a brain can see the bigger picture. This isn't about me being petty, Tamron. This is about injustice. But I wouldn't expect someone outside of that world to understand the layers of it. It was an unmistakable put down. The audience murmured louder now, some shifting uneasily, others whispering among themselves. Tamron, still unbothered, simply inclined her head. You speak of injustice. And yet, when we look at your life now, the Netflix deals, the book, the podcast, some would say you've benefited greatly from the very institution you criticize. Do you see why people might call that contradictory? Meghan's voice rose sharp and impatient. Oh, please. The constant obsession with money and deals. We built opportunities because we had no choice. We were cut off. Do you expect us to live in poverty? To just vanish quietly because people are uncomfortable with us succeeding outside of their precious monarchy? Tamron's response was calm, surgical. I don't expect you to vanish, but I do think there's a difference between survival and empire building. And the criticism comes not from the success itself, but from the narrative you've built around struggle. To many, those two things don't quite add up. Meghan's eyes flashed with irritation. She leaned forward, her tone almost mocking. Well, maybe that's because people prefer the fairy tale. The poor little duchess struggling against the big bad palace. But life isn't a fairy tale, Tamarind. It's messy. It's complicated. And quite frankly, most people aren't smart enough to grasp that. The insult hung heavy in the air. The audience's reaction was immediate. Us, a few boos, nervous laughter. Tamron remained poised, though her patience was clearly fraying. Martin, enough, she repeated, her voice lower now, more deliberate. So when people question your story, when journalists ask for clarity, your answer is that they're simply not intelligent enough to understand. Yes, Meghan snapped, her mask slipping completely now. That's exactly what I'm saying. People don't get it. They never will. And honestly, I'm tired of pretending otherwise. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the cameras seemed to hold still, capturing the moment a carefully crafted media persona unraveled into arrogance. Tamron leaned back in her chair, her voice calm but edged with finality. Well, she said softly, that's quite the statement. The audience broke into scattered applause, though it was tinged with discomfort. Meghan, flushed and defensive, crossed her arms tightly, as though daring anyone to challenge her further. Tamron, however, wasn't finished. She closed her folder with deliberate slowness, the snap of the papers punctuating the growing tension. And we'll pick up right there, she said, her eyes never leaving Meghan's. Because I think our viewers deserve to hear what happens when strong words meet accountability. The camera zoomed in on Meghan's tight jaw, her defiant stare. Viewers at home leaned closer to their screens, sensing the storm that was only beginning to brew. The air in the studio was so thick with tension it almost vibrated. Meghan sat rigid, arms crossed like a barricade, her eyes narrowed at Tamron. The audience, restless now, could feel that this interview had shifted into a battle zone. Tamron, still serene, shuffled her papers and offered the faintest of smiles. It wasn't warmth. It was the smile of someone sharpening their scalpel before the next cut. Meghan, Tamron began evenly, we've spoken about your departure from the royal family, about your view of the institution, but I want to turn now to something very personal. Your relationship with other members of the family, particularly the Prince and Princess of Wales. Even before Meghan opened her mouth, her jaw tightened. Everyone knew this subject was radioactive. What about them? Meghan snapped, her tone already defensive. Tamron tilted her head slightly, unruffled. There have been numerous reports over the years of tension between you and Catherine. The publicus always admired her composure and sense of duty. Some say there was rivalry. Did you feel overshadowed by her? Meghan let out a sharp laugh, a sound so brittle it made the audience stir uncomfortably. Overshadowed? Please, I wasn't competing with her. I brought something completely different. Diversity, modernity, global perspective. If anything, Catherine was the one scrambling to adjust to me. The arrogance in her tone was unmistakable. A murmur rippled through the studio audience. Tamron's expression remained calm, but her voice gained a subtle firmness. And yet, the public image suggests something different. Catherine's popularity only seemed to rise as yours began to falter. Did that bother you? Meghan leaned forward now, her eyes flashing. What bothers me is how the media pits women against each other, as if two women can't exist in the same space without being compared. Catherine has her role. I had mine. But let's be honest. The institution protected her in ways they never protected me. That's the only reason she's adored. Without that shield, she wouldn't last a week. The audience gasped audibly. Tamron clasped her hands, her voice gentle but cutting. So, you're saying Catherine's popularity is artificial, manufactured by palace machinery? Of course it is, Meghan shot back, her words sharp as glass. Do you think people genuinely connect with someone who barely speaks, barely shows personality? It's branding, Tamron, nothing more. The insult hung in the air like smoke. Even some members of the audience shifted, visibly uneasy with Meghan's harshness. Tamron allowed the silence to linger just long enough before stepping back in. Some might say that sounds less like critique and more like envy. Is it difficult for you to see William and Catherine thriving in the role you and Harry walked away from? Meghan's smirk returned this time venomous. Envy? That's laughable. I left by choice. I didn't want that suffocating life. If they want to play dress up and smile for cameras until the day they die, that's their business. I'm above that. The audience reacted again, a mix of gasps, murmurs, and scattered claps from a few supporters. But the overall mood was shifting against her. Tamron leaned forward, her voice lower now, heavy with intention. You say you're above it, and yet you continue to speak about them, to compare yourself to them, to frame yourself as a victim of the system that they continue to serve. If you're truly above it, why keep revisiting it? Meghan stiffened. Because people keep asking me, Tamron. I can't control what the public obsesses over. Tamron's reply was sharp, surgical, but you can control your own answers. You choose every time to return to Catherine, to William, to grievances, to point fingers. That doesn't sound like being above it. That sounds like fixation. For the first time, Meghan's confidence faltered. Her lips parted, but no immediate answer came. Her eyes flickered toward the audience, searching for validation before snapping back at Tamarind with renewed hostility. You know what, Tamarind? She hissed. I don't need to justify myself to you. You sit there with your notes pretending you understand a world you could never comprehend. You weren't hunted by tabloids. You weren't trapped by protocols. Don't you dare lecture me about fixation. The tension in the room was electric, the audience hanging on every word. Tamron, still unflappable, simply raised an eyebrow. I'm not lecturing you, Meghan, she said calmly. I'm observing what the rest of the world sees. And what they see is a woman who cannot stop measuring herself against the very family she claims to have left behind. The blow landed. Meghan's cheeks flushed, her composure slipping further. She leaned back, crossing her arms again, her silence louder than any protest. Tamron shifted slightly in her chair, preparing her next strike. Let's step back for a moment because this isn't just about family. This is about your narrative. You've painted yourself as a disruptor, a voice of change, someone breaking free from an oppressive system. And yet, at every turn, your words circle back to the palace, the monarchy, the comparisons. Some would say your identity is entirely defined by the very institution you denounce. The audience applauded softly at the observation, a wave of approval rolling toward Tamron. Meghan's response came quickly, but her voice trembled just slightly with emotion. That's not true. I have my own voice, my own projects, my own causes. I don't need them to define me. Tamron's eyes narrowed, her tone firm but polite. Then perhaps it's time to prove it. Meghan, because right now, to many, it seems your platform exists not because of who you are, but because of who you married. And that distinction matters. The studio fell silent. Meghan's face hardened, her lips pressed into a thin line. She looked as though she wanted to speak, to lash out, but no words came. For the first time, it was clear Tamron had pushed her into a corner, and everyone watching knew. The breaking point was near. The studio lights glared hotter than ever. Though it wasn't the bulbs heating the room, it was the tension between the two women. Meghan Markle sat rigid, arms folded tightly, her chin tilted in stubborn defiance. Tamron Hall, still seated with calm authority, placed her notes down on the table, almost ceremonially, as though declaring, "We're done pretending this is just an interview." "Meghan," Tamron began, her voice softer, but deadlier than it had been all morning. "You keep insisting you're telling your truth, that you're above the monarchy, that you've moved on, but everything about your presence here today proves the opposite. You are still defined entirely by the crown." The words hung heavy. Meghan's face twitched, a crack in the mask. "That's not fair," Meghan retorted quickly, her voice rising. "I've worked tirelessly on causes, projects, charity. I've created a global brand, Tamron. I'm more than just Tamron," cut her off, her voice firmer now. "More than just Prince Harry's wife. Because, Meghan, that's what it looks like to the rest of the world. Without Harry, without his family name, without the palace you love to despise, you wouldn't be sitting here on my show. You wouldn't have the Netflix deal. You wouldn't have the podcast. You wouldn't even have the attention you're clinging to now." The audience gasped collectively, the sound swelling like a wave. Meghan's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed with fury. "How dare you reduce me like that?" she hissed. "I had a career before Harry. I was an actress. I had recognition." Tamron leaned forward, her gaze sharp, her voice cutting through Meghan's protest like steel. "Recognition? Meghan, you were a supporting character on a cable drama. You weren't a global icon until you married into that family. That's the truth, and the public knows it, even if you refuse to admit it." Meghan's lips trembled as she tried to respond, but Tamron wasn't finished. Her voice grew louder, commanding the space. "You talk about being silenced, about being victimized, but let's be real. You've profited every step of the way. You wanted the palace's prestige without the responsibility. You wanted the titles without the duty. You wanted to be treated like Diana, adored and untouchable. But you never put in the work she did." The name Diana sparked a flash of outrage in Meghan's eyes. "Don't you dare compare me to her," she snapped, her voice shaking with anger. Tamron didn't flinch. "I'm not comparing. I'm contrasting. Diana had flaws, but she also had authenticity. She served. She fought for causes without constantly centering herself. You, Meghan, have turned every hardship into an opportunity to sell a narrative, to sell yourself." The audience erupted with murmurs, some clapping, some gasping. Meghan sat frozen, her face flushed crimson. "And let's address something else while we're here," Tamron continued, her tone now unrelenting. "Your obsession with Catherine and William. You can disguise it however you like. Call it media obsession. Call it palace favoritism. But the truth is plain. You resent them. You envy the respect they command, the steadiness they represent, the love they receive from the public, and you can't stand it. That was the blow that shattered the dam." Meghan's eyes filled with tears, her bravado crumbling as the audience watched. She shook her head furiously, whispering, "That's not true. That's not true." Though her voice cracked with each word, Tamron pressed the final dagger home. "It is true, Meghan, because everything about your story, every interview, every complaint, every contradiction circles back to the same theme. You couldn't handle not being the center of attention. You couldn't stand not being Catherine. So you left, and you've been trying to justify it ever since. But deep down, you know, without Harry's name, without that crown you loathe but depend on, you're nothing." Meghan gasped as if the words had physically struck her. Her tears spilled over, streaking down her face. the flawless image finally breaking under the weight of Tamron's words. The studio was silent now. No murmurs, no claps, just the sound of Meghan's quiet sobs as she covered her face with her hand. Tamron, maintaining her composure, leaned back slightly. Her voice softened, but the steel in it remained. I take no pleasure in saying this, Meghan, but the truth isn't always pleasant. And today, for once, someone had to say it to you. Meghan stood suddenly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I don't have to stay here and be humiliated like this, she cried, her voice breaking. This is cruelty, not journalism. Tamron met her gaze steadily. No, Meghan, this is accountability. Security staff appeared quietly at the edge of the set, but Meghan waved them off, storming toward the exit herself. The cameras followed her just long enough to catch the image of the Duchess turned celebrity in tears fleeing the studio. When she was gone, Tamron turned back to the camera. Her face was calm, her tone professional, but her eyes carried the fire of a journalist who had done what few dared. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, what you've just seen is not about cruelty. It's about truth. Public figures don't get to have it both ways. They don't get to change their stories when convenient, to play victim when challenged, to demand sympathy without scrutiny. That's not how journalism works, and it's not how accountability works. The camera zoomed closer as Tamron delivered her closing line. You wanted authenticity. This was it. And maybe, just maybe, it's the moment we all stopped confusing celebrity with credibility. The screen faded to black. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think Tamron went too far? Or was this exactly the kind of honesty the public has been waiting for? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown of one of the most unforgettable TV clashes in recent memory, make sure to hit that like button, smash subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story.